Hello, hi there. Welcome to Drag and Spirituality, Gender Diverse. My name is Bonnie Violet. I am a queer chaplain. I am trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm super stoked and excited for you all to be here. We are going to be joining in a conversation with three other drag artists where we are going to engage in conversation around drag and spirituality, amongst so many other things you'll hear about gender and sexuality, and who knows what we're going to talk about, but it's going to be great. I want to take a second to thank our sponsor this evening, which is Glide Church and the Glide Pride team. Big shout out to them for hosting us and supporting this event happening again. I believe this is the third or fourth year that we've collaborated to put on a drag and spirituality event. And we are so glad that you all could join us this evening. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to for a queer chaplain. A queer chaplain. I wanted to just thank our Patreon members. Patreon is a way in which people contribute on a monthly basis to support the work of a queer chaplain, which a queer chaplain programming is conversations around drag and spirituality, around being trans and spirituality. We also are putting on a spiritual drag conference later this year in October that's going to take place in Chicago. And there's lots of other great things that a queer chaplain is working on over the next few months. So check out aqueerchaplain.org to learn more about the queer chaplain and to get connected with the Patreon. In the bottom in the ticker, you can also see a thank you to everyone. I'm not going to go ahead and thank everyone out loud at the moment, just because we have a robust conversation to have, and I have three artists that are chomping at the bit to get in here. So the first artist I would like to bring to the stage is Ashley Blow. Ashley Blow, hey girl.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great this lovely Saturdays. It's good to see you.
Awesome. So glad that you could join me. And I want to also invite the Dragon King. Hey, how's it going? And last but not least, Bobby Friday.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So glad that we all could be here this lovely afternoon on a Saturday in full drag. Full drag, right?
You don't need to see my pants.
I know, right?
Drag
Exactly. One thing I didn't mention is that for audience members, we would love for you to engage in this conversation as well. So feel free, whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or Twitch, to just put in the comments any questions or comments that you might have, and we will engage with them as much as possible. Also, you will notice the social media accounts and Venmo accounts and PayPal accounts of all the drag artists. So please do engage with those as much as possible. You can find them on the screen throughout the event, as well as you can see them in the description of the video. So I think that's enough of the logistics. Let's go ahead and move on with this thing. So I love, so you are artist number 31, 32, and 33 of drag artists that have been interviewed by myself to talk about spirituality. And I often like to start from the beginning. So I would love to hear just a little bit about your childhood, whatever comes to your mind that you feel like you'd like to share, but something from your childhood. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Blow, pronounced they, them. Thank you again, Bonnie Violet, for having this event and having this discussion. My childhood, it wasn't the greatest, but there was definitely some bright spots that led me to being the performer that I am today. And I guess I was just a natural performer when I think about my childhood. I went to an elementary school in Bronx, New York. So that's where sort of religion and spirituality started for me. And one of the things I always wanted to do was, sing in the choir or play music or be in a play. So I was always very animated and wanting attention on me and wanting people to look at me and not wanting to not be seen. One of the dumbest things I did as a kid to get attention is I wanted everybody to think I had braces. So I put aluminum foil on my teeth and went to school and told everybody I had braces because I just wanted the attention. And I know the teachers must have looked at me like, what is wrong with this kid? But but I used to dress up like Michael Jackson and try to create hair out of yarn and like a what do you call it, like a headband. So I would like staple yarn to it and make it hair and do this sort of thing.
So fun.
Another thing I did, again, this is in the Bronx in the projects, is I would sing Annie, the sun will come out tomorrow, out the window. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Bronx and familiar with like the housing projects, but we all have like these gates on our windows. So I'm just holding on to the gate singing, the sun will come out tomorrow. I don't know why I did that, but anyway. But yeah, my childhood was filled with a lot of performing and joining choral groups and performing arts groups. And when I got older, I joined the chorus. I started doing drag, and here I am today.
Yeah, sounds like you were destined to be a drag artist one day. I've never heard anyone talk about braces like that. When I was little, I had a babysitter, and she had braces, and she was like, I just thought she was so cute and pretty, and so like I wanted braces because I thought like that's what would make me pretty, right, or whatever. But anyways, how about you? How about you, the Dragon King?
I actually grew up in a house that was very resistant to me doing performance. Like they let me do band, like I did alto and bari sax, but that was seen as more like just like educational enough that it would still like be useful to me. Like they really wanted me to go to college. My dad grew up dirt poor, had to do a lot of really difficult stuff just to get an education. So I understood where he was coming from, but he was very resistant to me doing like what little theater I managed to squeeze myself into. It was very resistant. And then I went to college, and then I came out, and then I discovered what drag kings are. And then I moved to the Bay Area. So here we are. But yeah, it was seen as like a distraction doing like theater or performance or something like, or stuff like that. So yeah, not all that much in terms of spirituality. My father was raised Jewish, but then was, I don't want to say forced to become Catholic, but when his father left my grandmother, he was like, my grandmother decided, okay, we're going to be Catholic now, because he was Jewish. And so he grew up Catholic, sent me to Catholic school. My mother's Lutheran. The Catholics do not always get along super well with Lutheran. So it's just this, like, three religions were always mentioned and discussed in my household. And the like pros and cons and like different opinions were always there. So I did at least learn to like think critically about everything, but it was also sometimes confusing because it's like, I don't know. It was a lot of different identities like kind of mushed in, and that's why I really appreciate that with drag. I can at least kind of like parse through the Catholic school feelings a little bit. And my dad and I don't speak a lot, but I would like to talk to him more about his Jewish upbringing more and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Bobby?
Okay. So I'm like sitting here like listening to everything that everybody said, and so far I feel like there's just so much that I relate to, right? I think as like queer people and then like queer artists, we all sort of have these really like similar sort of like stories, or at least underlying parts of our story, right? But for me, um, growing up as a kid, I think I always loved performing. I always loved being center of attention. I mean, as long as I can remember. And the thing is that I was born in 1983, which just so happens to be the year that Madonna released her first full studio album. And I have been obsessed with Madonna literally like my entire life. Like there's like every pivotal moment in my life, there's a Madonna album and a Madonna song that like I can think of, and I think exactly of that time and what was happening. But it started with me like I used to watch the Like a Virgin tour video on repeat every single day and just like stuff sheets in the back of my shorts so that I could have a train and perform like a virgin on the coffee table. And so I always just loved performing, and I think as a boy, right, like growing up, and especially like in the 80s, I feel like things aren't so much like they are now. And we were, I think and then of course my dad is Latin and Mexican. And so then there's also that sort of like an expectation of sort of like you're a boy and you're supposed to act a certain way. But the thing is that I just never really was like interested in that stuff. Like I always wanted to play with Barbies, and I always like wanted to play dress up, and like I was always interested in fashion and beauty. And so it was like I learned early on to live this sort of like double life, if you will. Because growing up for me in school, like I think I started getting called a faggot in the second grade. And what was funny is that my parents divorced when I was 5, and so like my parents were really great. They, I think like every family we had our issues and stuff, but after my parents divorced, we moved around a lot. And I remember that I always used to have this feeling of like every time I'd move and I'd start at a new school, it'd be like a reset, like, and then it would always be that same group of boys within 5 days that would like zero in on something about me, and then it would like I would just start being bullied again. So growing up, like I always felt really lonely. I always felt I always had the sense that like something was like felt like wrong with me. But there was also this weird like sort of, I think that's where the idea of being creative or being artistic, like in that loneliness and trying to find a way to like feel it, in my fantasy, it was always grand. I was always the most beautiful, like shining thing that like, and people loved me for like who I was. And yeah, so I think a lot of that sort of played into it. And as far as like spirituality, that was also really difficult for me too, because I grew up in a Christian household. And, there's some things about Christianity that I think that are really great, about love thy neighbor and, do unto others and that sort of stuff. But then I remember it very distinctively, actually. I was on a camping trip with my parents and my grandparents, and we were in Utah. We were at this water park that was an RV ground, and I remember standing in line, and these two older girls, they were like teenage girls. I wasn't a teenager yet, but I remember standing in line and them talking to me and asking me like, oh, so what religion are you? And then saying like Christian, and then them very like immediately, well, what kind of Christian? And that just put sort of this sort of, for me, put like a big wall, because I already felt that like, because I was being bullied and I was already this sort of like outcast. I already felt like, okay, well, if there's this place, this is my religion, this is supposed to be my safe space, my spirituality. And I'm already then being asked, well, what kind of Christian are you? That just made me feel like even more disconnected from things. And honestly, it wasn't, and I went through like this whole thing of like, coming out and finding my tribe. And, my tribe just so happened to be the Bay Area rave scene. Which it was a great time. I was young, we were having fun, but that meant that I was also experimenting with a lot of substances, and then eventually that took over, and then I found myself in full-blown drug addiction. And I really haven't had, it was going to rehab and getting sober and sort of being forced to like trust in something outside of myself, because clearly my way of thinking and my approach to life was no longer working for me. So I had to just sort of put faith in other people. And that's sort of where I reconnected with the idea of spirituality. And and the truth is that I don't really know what that is. I don't feel like it's so much of a religious thing, because I feel like religion can be a little bit dicey sometimes, right? Because I feel like there's this, in most religions, there's a book. You're supposed to like read this book. And then you have all these people picking and choosing what parts of the book that they're going to take and like what works for them. And then pointing the finger at other people. And for me, it's like, I'd rather just pick the parts of the book and then like leave it alone and just go about my life and just not be a dick, right? Just don't be an asshole. Like, like just be a good person. Like, and, and for me, the idea of spirituality really just is being connected to things of people, places, things around me,
Yeah.
So I feel like I went off on a tangent, which is probably
no, it's perfect. No, it's really great. It leads us right into a question that we have from the audience. I think really well. You kind of already answered the question a little bit, so we can pose it to the other two. But the question is from Amy. Amy says, "How do you connect to your faith during dark times? Do you use faith to help you through pain, physical or mental?" And Mark, if you could put it up on the screen, that'd be great. Or I'm sorry, LB. we have some lovely tech folks. Mark and LB are helping us out, so you all can see the question again up here. But would either of you like to answer that question? I know
Sure.
we're going right into the faith conversation.
That's a good question.
Yes, very good question.
I'll start. I think for a long time I had a very tough relationship with religion and spirituality because of the way I was brought up. I was brought up in a Pentecostal household, so everything was fire and brimstone, and you're going to hell and you're a terrible person. So for a while, I really rejected religion and I rejected spirituality and didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I could tell during that time, that's when sort of the light went out inside of me, and I just sort of went down this dark spiral and into heavy drinking and drugs and that sort of thing, because I wasn't connected, because I let my past and my childhood and my experience affect how I felt and how I existed in life. But there was always something, whenever there were dark times, I was always looking to a higher power, and I didn't want to admit to myself that I was looking into a higher power to get me out of what I was in. So a lot of times music for me is a way to get through the dark times. And it's spiritual music, and it's music that's kind of controversial, especially in the LGBTQ community, because it's Christian music. I appreciate Christian music and Christianity for the message that it's trying to send, but it might not be sending correctly. especially when you get to fire and brimstone, going to hell and that sort of thing. But the beautiful things that come out of it, like loving one another and loving yourself, and connecting with something that's greater than yourself. I love that. Like, it brings me joy, and it gives me hope. So one of the things I listen to connect with my faith, or one of the things I do is connect with music. And then when I'm connected with music and I'm connected with my higher power and I'm being my most authentic self, which is through performing, that gets me through. If I'm not performing, or if I'm not existing in a space where I can express myself, that's when things go dark. So I try to, again, listen to music to get me out of that, and also do things that connect me with my higher power, which to me is through art and performance.
Thank you. The Dragon King?
Yeah. Sorry, allergies. I, through the process of going through the Catholic school system, through growing up with Jewish relatives, growing up with Lutheran relatives, I am a baptized Lutheran, and I don't go to church, and I'm still trying to figure out, like, if I even want to, like, identify under a specific religion. But the thing that I do believe in the soul. Like, I do believe that, like, that imprints of ourselves linger. I live in a very haunted house, so I'm very convinced of this. This used to be a convent. This is over 100 years old. The nuns get feisty sometimes. And because of that, it's like, okay, there is a soul. I can at least believe that there is some higher power. And I wish I could remember the name of this ruler, but I'm reminded of, it was like a clip of a Muslim ruler speaking to a Christian, and it was basically him saying, like, you see this torn tapestry, there are many holes and the sunlight shines through in different ways. Your God is a just different shining of the same light. And that is what I most believe in. That is what I take the most comfort in, that, like, I don't believe in specific religions going to hell because they don't follow the same practice. I just try to be as kind to everyone as humanly possible, and hope that there is some higher power, that my beliefs on the soul are correct, and then just that we can just try our best to be kind to one another. And that's what I try to hold with me when things do get dark and things get scary in the outside world.
Yeah, I think for myself, I think that that's one of the things that I've always found so frustrating about religion in general, especially as someone who grew up being, like, bullied for being different. You're just like, it's just that idea of, like, oh, my religion's the only right religion, and if you're not, like, falling in line with that, and you're not doing what my religion tells you to do, then you're going to hell. Like, first of all, like, that just, like, when you look at, like, the underlying messages of a lot of different religions, and a lot of them are very similar, so it's sort of like, okay, well, if there's all these underlying messages that are very similar, well, who's to say is the right one versus the wrong one? I think it's just like, I think if there's this, like, underlying message of, like, be a good person and try and like ultimately you're responsible for your own life, the good and the bad. And so, like, it's all about how you approach that, or what side, if you choose to live in a negative way and put negativity out into the world, then most likely that's what's going to come back to you, or, vice versa. And so this, honestly, for me, sometimes I get, like, I don't know if I necessarily believe in this whole idea of, like, heaven or hell, and that, like, however we choose to live here is like determines where we're going to go in that next part. Like the reality is that like, I don't know. Like, and I think that most people don't know. But what I do know is that in certain parts of my life, it definitely felt like I was living in hell. Right. Like, and so if I change the way that I go through my life, if I change what I'm putting out into the world, if I change my perspective on things, if I work on changing myself, then all of a sudden I can find I've like what I found is especially like through performance and that sort of stuff, that like sometimes I can access that like heaven on earth. Sometimes I'm in that place where things feel really, really good and it's like bliss. And so for me, I just like focus on trying to be present in the moment rather than thinking about what's going to happen when I'm dead, because I'm not there. I don't know.
Yes. I agree. If I can add to that, both with what the Dragon King said and Bobby Friday make very good points. Someone asked a question about, do you subscribe to a specific religion? I absolutely don't. And I think for me, and in my opinion, I'm sort of group averse anyway, because I think what happens is we have all these different religions around the world. Everyone thinks they're right. And what happens in that is if you don't follow that particular religion, then all those different groups start fighting each other because you're not doing what they think you're supposed to be doing. I think not following religion and being a free people as we are, we're free to exist, we're free to practice religion, and we're free not to practice religion. For me, it's very freeing not to practice a religion, but to find my own path to connect to my higher power as I see that higher power. And through that, it's living, it's performing, it's connecting with people, it's connecting with our environment. It's trying to just be a good person without telling other people, well, if you don't do it my way, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. Robert in the comments says, take what works and screw the rest, which is a lot of what we heard. There was also a comment from Angel, aka Linda Summers, who said, through prayer and meditation, who answered the question that you all were posed, through prayer and meditation, but knowing that sometimes I might not get the answers that I want, but understanding that the effort that goes into prayer and meditation is tapping into that power that's pure love and forgiving. Just a question: Do any of you have what the question is? How do you connect? You talked a little bit about it, but do you do prayer? Do you do meditation? Do you have ways of connecting with either yourself or that which is outside of me, outside of you, that you would like to share? I know we heard a little bit, like Ashley talked a lot about music and things like that. But does anyone want to talk about the prayer or meditation? Or for me, I like candles. I don't know why, but for me, it's helpful just to light a candle, think of somebody that I know, I love, something that they're going through. And for me, that feels a little bit more, I don't know, it feels right for me. How about you all?
Well, for me, I have a really difficult time like sitting still. So the idea of like, let me just sit here and like stew on something or like meditate or try and get in touch with myself, it's just sometimes too much. I'm like, bitch, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to turn on Beverly Hills, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and call it a night. Okay, I'm done. Well, I'm going to be meditating with Erica Jane over here. Okay.
Right.
But for me, honestly, one thing that I have found that really works is, and this is why I think, sometimes my sisters and like other performers in the community will read me, because I like to take my time when I get ready, when I'm like painting and I'm doing all of this, because for me, it's one of the few times where I feel like quiet enough to just sort of like get in touch with like what I'm feeling, like, or or I just find myself in this place where I'm really present in like what it is that I'm doing, and my mind isn't like going 15,000 different directions at once, or I'm not like thinking about like, oh, I need to be this place, and that place. Is that every time? No, but more times than not, when I'm putting myself into drag, there is a form of meditation and a form of like plugging in. And it's weird because I think of plugging in. Plugging in for me happens when I unplug this, right? Like when I unplug my brain, like from that endless cycle of like just thoughts and like things that I'm constantly thinking about. When I unplug that and just get into like the moment and what I'm doing, that's when I feel like that there's this like sort of meditation happening. And that's all of a sudden when things will become clear for me, or maybe things that I was feeling a certain way about, all of a sudden that's resolved, or I know the next right thing to do, or, you know, things like that. So traditional meditation doesn't work for me, but painting my face does.
Yeah. I can relate to that completely. I have a similar experience when I'm, you know, getting in the face and stuff. I mean, to me, creating is like such a spiritual thing, you know, giving life to something, you know, like what's more godly or divine or sacred than that. And so I think, you know, putting on a face, putting on the stones, whatever, like all of that to me is bringing life to, you know, to an expression or that sort of thing. So I totally relate to what you just shared, Bobby. How about Dragon King or Ashley Blow?
I can go. I have too much anxiety and I am too neurodivergent to do meditation. I'll get too distracted in my own head. So what I do is I will. The reason I love living in San Francisco so much is because I can go on these long ass walks. Like I've gone walking for almost 7 hours in like the darkest times in my life, and I'll have a playlist, and sometimes it'll have words and sometimes it won't. And the times when it doesn't, it's at least like enough that I can tune out the rest of the world, but like see everything around me and like have that time to like think out my life and figure out what I need. And I do find painting meditative, but honestly, the times when I get like a lot more introspective or in the zone is when I'm working on accessories or sewing or something like that. I don't know. There's just something about like doing the tiniest little details and using gallons of hot glue for the particular stuff that I work on. That's just really soothing and really able to just kind of recenter myself and kind of like realign where I am in the universe. And it's some of the few times I feel like I can just have that time to myself, because I'm between doing drag, working at multiple venues, working security and door at multiple venues, running 2 event spaces. There's a lot of talking and there's a lot of chatter, and it's sometimes very hard not to just like give all that I have to everyone else and not take that time to like recenter inside of myself. So I find like the music, the walking, the tuning out a good way to kind of realign myself.
Awesome.
Yeah, I see a lot of similarities between religious and non-religious folks, and it comes down to a practice and what brings you joy. And for a lot of religious folks, it's the Sunday church. It's seeing their friends at church and going through the traditions and that sort of thing. And then for a lot of non-religious folks, speaking for myself in particular, I loved going to my Gay Men's Chorus rehearsals every Monday. That was such a spiritual experience for me. When we would sing together, we're fumbling through the music, and then when it finally connects and we're all connected to this piece of music, there's so much joy that comes out of that, and it's such a spiritual moment. So that's a connection for me. Also, I agree with Bobby and the Dragon King. You know, there's a connection with oneself when you're painting and you're living in your art space, and then performing. You know, that's the ultimate connection for me. If I'm performing a song, sometimes I just get lost in the music or get lost in the song, because I try to do songs that mean something to me, and that's such a spiritual thing. And you're looking out at the audience and you're connecting with the audience and you're feeling that energy and you're just there with everybody. That is church for me. I love it.
Indeed.
And might I add that Ashley is an incredible performer.
Yeah.
If you have not seen them perform,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And you all speak really beautifully to, like, in the beginning of like doing drag and spirituality, before I ever even did drag, I was interviewing drag artists because I saw them as our spiritual leaders. As somebody who grew up in church and Jesus and then got hurt and harmed, I was really drawn to drag artists who were kind of doing the work of church. In my mind, they were raising money to take care of people in the community. They were out in community. They were like, visible. They were helping us get in touch with information and education that we needed, or maybe even getting out of ourselves and being able to laugh and experience joy or even cry sometimes. And to me, I just feel like whether or not drag artists want to call themselves that or not, I think that we are spiritual leaders and that we are impacting our community in a way that hopefully, preachers and rabbis and monks and other spiritual leaders, I hope they're having the same impact on their communities as we do within ours. I want to go ahead and take a quick, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. And then we'll come back to talk a little bit more about drag.
Meeting up with the homies was a little different this year, but we still found a way to make it work.
Y'all heard y'all hoes, you could talk, you talking all this shit, but let me see if you could walk.
There's so much media being made by our community that it can be a little overwhelming to find something new to get into. But what if there was a place where you can find curated podcasts, music, and other media by BIPOC and QTPOC creators? The Cube is an all-in-one platform where you can find the best media by BIPOC and QTPOC creators right at your fingertips. It's loaded with features for artists and audiences, like being able to tip your favorite creators or being able to participate in revenue share when you publish on the platform. We've come a long way in developing this app, and we need your help to get us past the finish line. If you want quality, curated content and a community just for us, support The Cube.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for that brief little break. I also wanted to just, talk to the folks in the comments. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation. I know we haven't quite been able to put everything up on the screen or engage with you, but just know that we are listening or reading and we are engaged with you. So please continue to join us in the conversation. I wanted to get a sense from you all, if you could talk about like I know, like, my first favorite drag artist was Ivana Bump. I met her in Phoenix, Arizona when I was just a wee thing. And I just wanted to hear a little bit maybe about when you were first introduced to drag and maybe what your experience was with that.
So
All right,
my first experience with drag, I mean, honestly, I remember being young and watching the Sally Jesse Raphael show, and this was like in the early 90s. It was the reign of the club kid, and I just remember like, you know, these club kids, people like Amanda Lepore and people like that, like coming on to the show and just thinking, like seeing them and thinking like, that is what I want to be, like that sort of expression of beauty and outrageousness, and just like sort of, I think what I really appreciated was the idea that it was so in your face and so unapologetic and so just beautiful in its own way. And then of course Tu Wong Fu came out, and I did make my parents drag me. I dragged my parents to the movie theater, like, I don't even know, 8 times to see it. And I mean, I was just obsessed. So those were my first influences. But as far as like first, like person that I actually met, of course, I remember going to T-Shack back when Heclina was still doing that at the Stud. But the first person that I ever met that had an influence on me was this fabulous queen, and her name was Nikki Starr. And I met her at the Marlena's, which was a bar in Hayes Valley. It was around forever. It's not there anymore, but it was a fabulous bar, and it's where a lot of like members of the Imperial Court and stuff hung out and were at all the time. But Nikki was just... she was very kind to me, and I just remember she had a very larger than life personality that I really enjoyed. So, yeah.
Awesome. Ashley or the Dragon King?
I can go. I didn't know that drag kings existed until about college. I did know that queens existed. I actually remember when I was growing up, one of my still close friends from high school was in love with Peaches Christ. And I'm so sad I didn't get to see her perform live when I was in high school. But I knew she was in the Rocky Horror community, which I was already obsessed with Rocky Horror. I knew she did like horror type drag. And there was just something about that I knew that there were, that drag queens were a thing, and that they would do accentuated femininity, but seeing like this person with like chopped off titties, it just scratched an itch in my brain. And God, if young me knew that I now do terror vaults with Peaches Christ, like I think I would not have believed that. So she has been a huge influence in my life, and she's the just warmest, best employer I've ever had. I'm gonna be real, like has always been accommodating to my disabilities. Very lovely. In terms of the first drag king, I binged watched videos of Spiky Van Dyke and a few others, but the first drag king that I actually met in real life is my drag father, Vera. I went to a Rebel Kings of Oakland show, and there was just this happy ball of energy bouncing around, being like, "Hello, baby angels. Wow, wow, wow." I'm gazing. Such positivity. Ended up being my trainer for the National LGBT Hotline, and that's how we really like bonded, because they were the one who taught me how to be a peer counselor for LGBT people all across the country. And like, that's how we bonded. That's how we started talking more. And I am blessed to be their 13th child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Vera's fruitful. Extremely so.
Yeah.
And I've just so like, between the like spoopy influences from Peaches, the just positivity and like instilled family goals to give back to the community, be a positive influence, and like help as many people as possible. And just all the influences from my very extensive drag family has been like just this beautiful thing that I greatly cherish.
Yes, Vera is amazing.
Yes.
Love her.
Yes, yes. Ashley?
Yeah, coming out in the 90s in New York, downtown West Village, my very best friend and I were walking through the village, being our young, immature selves, 16, 17 years old, seeing drag queens, and just sort of like giggling and being silly because we didn't understand it all. It was our first time to the village. But after a couple of trips back, we went to a bar in the village called Two Potato, where they had drag shows. A very small bar. They had drag shows, and this beautiful, tall, slender queen was performing, and she was doing "Meet Me on the Moon" by Phyllis Hyman. And I was so drawn to her. She had on this green dress and she was just captivating. She had this short bob on. And I knew there was something different about her, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And obviously I learned years later she was a trans performer. So she was a Black trans performer. And as a kid, I just didn't get it, but I was so connected with her in that moment. And I didn't have the words to describe how I was feeling, except now I can just say, to me, that was a spiritual experience. And there was something that connected me with her, that I was connected with, that years later, now I understand why. As a Black non-binary performer, I totally get it, but I would never forget that moment. It was so beautiful. And I think it sort of led me on the path that I am on today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that leads me right into the next topic I'd like for us to talk a little bit about is gender, and talking about either like our gender during the day, and or the gender we choose to express on stage or whatever. I know for me, I came to hold and identify as a trans person, I think strongly in part because I started doing drag. I think in doing drag, I was able to really find myself and have a place in which I could try it on, so to speak, or try parts of it on, and really began to find like who I don't know, like just a fuller expression of who I'd always wanted to become and be, but never felt like I was in the right environment or the right situation to be able to really even just try or experiment or see, I wonder what I would look like. And drag really did that for me. How has your gender been expressed or impacted by drag?
I'll just go.
Okay.
It's a long story, but I'm just going to keep it real short. Again, growing up in the 90s and in the Bronx, being a boy and being perceived as a certain type of boy has currency in the gay community. And that was taught to me at a very young age. And that just stuck with me for a very long time. So any feelings of femininity were just suppressed and hidden, because once the boys saw that, then that was a turn off. You weren't getting any D that night if they saw all that. So you just kept all that inside. And years later, I suppressed so much. I started going through depression and started trying to figure out like what is going on with me. At the same time, I was part of the chorus and I was doing a lot of drag and I was performing, and I was when I was in drag, I just felt, I was like, this just feels like me. And it's not just like being on stage and performing. It's like I see myself when I am, in hair and makeup. Like I see the person that I feel like I am on the inside. And that came out more and more the more I started to do drag. And I was able to connect with myself and my true self and my authentic self through performing and through doing drag. So about 5 years ago, I came out as trans and was living as a trans woman, and it was very public and all that stuff. And then something there was something else that was missing, because I felt like I was suppressing another part of myself. It's like I went from this end all the way to this end, and then I realized I don't have to be either. And that's when I recognized my non-binary identity, and I can embrace all of myself and all of my identities into one, and I don't have to be one or the other. And being non-binary has brought so much freedom to me. There's no pressure to be anything. I can exist as I want to exist. One day you're going to see me looking this way. Next day you're going to see me looking this way. It is what it is. And if you can't deal with it, I don't know what to tell you.
Yes.
Yeah, here, I'll go. I identify as trans non-binary. I'm AFAB. I've been on testosterone for almost 2 years now. That's crazy. And when I first started doing drag, before I went on testosterone at all, my king looks were very traditionally masked, very honestly pretty similar to this, maybe a bit less jiggle, but I think a lot of kings go through that. I've seen it. It's very common to see a lot of kings they'll go for very traditionally masked in the beginning, and some will stick with that and do an amazing, beautiful job. And then there'll be others, like me, for example, who, yes, they'll still have their traditionally masked looking looks, but I've been told some of my looks look very bearded queen, and I've actually debated on, do I want a drag king persona and a drag queen persona? But honestly, all of that is dragon. Dragon's pronouns are they, them. And I just drag kings are my home, and I want to still be a king, but I think I should still be able to dragon should still be able to have a skirt moment, or I recently did a look where I taped over the nipples and just had giant cherries on the titties. So it's well, we're just gonna have this moment. And it has been very healing for me to be able to feel for the first time fully comfortable in my masculinity, now that I feel comfortable in masculinity, now that I have those days where I can have my more euphoria, I feel much more comfortable putting eyeshadow on and lipstick and all these other things that for a lot of my younger years I was very resistant to, because it never felt quite right. And I didn't discover I was non-binary until I was about 21. So just all of high school and a lot of early college was this fervent, I must be a girl. I don't fully feel like a boy, so I must be a girl, and just a lot of tearing myself apart. But drag has really allowed me to do that gender healing, and be as expressive as I want. And I really appreciate that.
Bobby?
Yeah, so for me, obviously in drag, I identify as she, her. For me, my drag is an expression of this, it's a very westernized sort of expression of femininity, but I think that I enjoy that because sometimes it can be really extreme, and I enjoy everything that goes into that, even though it can be horribly uncomfortable. But outside of drag, or when I'm not, you know, fully done up, you know, it's really weird because growing up, I never really, I mean, I felt like a boy, like physically, right? Like when I'm looking at like this, you know, genitalia signed up birth sort of like thing, and you know, but like in another sense, I never really connected to being a quote unquote like what male's supposed to be, like that macho sort of sports loving, like all that stuff that like was drilled into my head as a kid of like, this is what society says you're supposed to be if you're a boy, right? I never identified with that either. And then there was a phase during my like kind of maybe teens into like my early 20s where I really started, I was totally obsessed with everything 80s and new wave and goth. And I think that the reason why I was so drawn to those subcultures in particular was that what I noticed was that a lot of the men were playing with femininity and wearing makeup and long hair and quote unquote women's clothes. And I think that that's what attracted to me to all of that, was that that was felt like something that was very natural for me to do. So I always sort of had this like androgynous, very gender bendy approach to like my self-expression. And the thing was is that there wasn't, the term non-binary really wasn't around yet, or at least I hadn't heard it, and especially not in terms of how we hear it now. Like, and so the first time that I ever really had like some had an idea of what to call maybe what I was that I was talking to someone and they like brought up the whole idea of being two-spirited, which is like Native American sort of beliefs, and they believe in two-spirit people. And that sort of like clicked for me. But very much like Ashley was talking about earlier, you know, I found myself in a particular community of gay men, and it was very much femininity was sort of frowned upon if you wanted to get the D. So, you know, I had to put her back in the closet, leave her in the closet, again, back in the closet. And that's sort of, you know, and then being as masculine as I can.
Right.
But then I started performing in drag a little over 4 years ago. And it's been really interesting because actually I was having a conversation with my partner a couple weeks ago. And I was talking to them about the fact that, you know, I think that I really identify as non-binary. Like, I don't think that there's necessarily and maybe this is, and you guys you feel free to correct me if I'm wrong or this isn't right, but like, I don't necessarily feel for myself that there is a trans component to maybe me being non-binary. Like, I feel perfectly comfortable in my body. I feel like everything is the way that it is supposed to be, but I just don't really feel bound by like gender roles in order to express myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get up in full drag, I'm a she and I'm like, you know, super hyper feminine. But then, I mean, I have sometimes where I'm just like going to the gym in a trucker hat and jersey shorts and like, you know, bobbing around with a full beard. And that's fine too.
Right.
I just don't feel bound by like these ideas of like gender and like specific roles or ways that we're supposed to present. And so in that way, I feel like I'm non-binary, but I think that has been one of the things that's been fun for me, is that I feel like I'm in a community where I'm in a safe space to sort of like explore that. And I'm encouraged to explore that. And I have a lot of people around me who I can talk to about it, and you know, hear what they have to say. And that's why conversations like this are so good. And this is actually the first time in a public forum that I've ever really like admitted that, like, that I feel that way. But so thank you. Like, and I look forward to just figuring it out, and or not figuring it out. I think that's the beauty of it, is that, like, you know, Ashley and Dragon were saying, like, I don't necessarily have to. I can just be happy and exist, and have whatever that looks like.
Yes. Thank you all so much for answering that question around gender. And it brings up a great question from the comments. Cameron asks, what advice or encouraging words would you give a young individual trying to understand the gift of being gender fluid and working hard to ensure their faith internally supports the feeling? I know for me, my transness is a direct result of my spirituality, but maybe some of you all could share some of your experience, Ashley or Dragon.
Yeah, I'll go. It's you know, I won't lie, it's hard because there's a lot of stress and confusion when you're trying to figure yourself out, especially because our society just wants you to, you know, pick a side and stick to it. And it's not as simple as that for me. I think exploring gender is the most spiritual thing you can do for yourself, because at the end of it all, you figure it out, and you really know yourself. And maybe you'll make a mistake over here, or maybe you'll go too far. And to be blunt, when I had top surgery, I was like, "Oop, nope, that's not what I really wanted to do." And I had to admit to myself, I was like, "That's not really exactly where I wanted to go." But I would say, take your time, really connect with yourself, try to figure it out. You might not get it right the first time. Talk to someone professionally if you can, along with a doctor. But I think going on the journey is definitely worth it. And at the end, you might realize, I didn't need any of that. Or you might realize and connect with who you truly are.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley.
Yeah, and for like I mentioned earlier, I volunteer for the National LGBT Hotline, and I get a lot of calls. I can't discuss any of the details of the calls because confidentiality, but like, it's a lot of young trans people, and we have chat rooms where they can like talk to other young trans people. We have a glossary where you can go over like every single definition, and the main thing I try to tell them is like, it's okay to not have everything figured out right now, and to be as kind to yourself as humanly possible. Like like trigger warning, like self-harm. When I was figuring out I was non-binary, but I was like, well, and I didn't fully understand that, like, for me personally, I'm somewhere between like no gender and very masculine. But the people I had like dated before, which unfortunately were a lot of straight men, I felt like no one would ever love me again. So I did attempt to end it when I was about 23, and I didn't have these resources. I didn't know it was fully going on with me. So I would just finding your local community, whether that be your national LGBT center, whether it be a hotline, whether it be anything at all, just the real soul killer is feeling alone, and making sure that during your journey, you're not completely isolated, I think is a very important step. And that's why like current events make me like very worried about trans youth, because like I just don't want them to feel alone or isolated, because that's the hardest thing, is like you're trying to figure out yourself, but you feel unsupported. So I would just recommend like finding that community, whether it be online, in person, what have you, like that's just really vital to like your spiritual health, I think.
Yeah. Very well said. Thank you so much for sharing that, both of you. So we are rounding up to about the last 10 minutes or so of our time here. And so I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to speak to something that maybe you had anticipated you would talk about before today that we haven't got to, or maybe something that's come up for you that you would like to share or maybe reiterate after having this conversation today. Does anything come to mind for anyone?
Well, I just want to thank everybody who's here for, being so open and vulnerable. And I feel like definitely Dragon and Ashley and Bonnie, there's so much that I feel like connected to you all now, because in the sense that I relate to so many different things that you said, and like I said, our experiences are very similar. But I think for me, sort of piggybacking off of what a Dragon just said and reading some of the things that are in the chat, this is why things like Pride Month are so important. And it goes back to like what we do as entertainers, drag artists, as performers, as volunteers in our community. Like I'm the reigning Grand Duchess of San Francisco. The reason why I do those things and the reason why I'm visible is so that other people who feel alone can see me and see that like I exist and that I'm here, and that if I'm here and I'm existing, then that means that they can too. And that's what, like, to me is like, I always feel like Pride is so important, and it's so important, especially for like the young kids, the youth, because I remember growing up, I felt so alone. I felt so isolated. Then that was because there wasn't, I didn't see anybody who was like me, And so I just, my thing for Pride Month this month is just like inspiring everybody to live louder, live prouder, and be bolder and shine brighter, every day, so that people know that we're here, we exist, and they can too.
Yes, very well said. Very well said. Ashley or Dragon?
I can go. I was just gonna just based on the last thing I talked about, just wanted to quickly plug the National LGBT Hotline. There's a website, it has the phone number, www.lgbthotline.org. There's no age limit. You do not have to be in full blown like crisis mode to call. Like if you're just confused, you have questions, if you're like feeling isolated, especially for the youth, like please call. And if you want to volunteer, we need volunteers, always and forever. And also the Trans Clinic, it's a website. It's the first fully online trans health group. It's trans owned. They can give you online consultations, help you get your medication. I'm doing a show with them next Tuesday for their Trans Tuesdays, and yeah, they're a really lovely group. I just wanted to mention those.
Thanks so much. And everyone, everyone's contact information, their socials are in the descriptions, or you're seeing them post in the comments. So feel free to reach out directly to any of the artists and they can get you connected. Ashley?
Just the one thing I learned through this journey of self-exploration is to love yourself. Loving yourself sometimes comes with sacrifices, especially if that means some type of gender exploration. It won't be easy. Sometimes you lose things that you love, and that's mainly the attention of certain spots of the LGBTQ community. Sometimes you just don't fit into those spaces anymore. So, it's just a different experience, but it is the most spiritual and the most connecting thing that I did for myself, was to love myself, to accept myself, to live the most authentic way that I possibly could, and accept anything that comes with that. But again, live authentically, live your truth. And then those people that do come into your life, you're going to show them your most authentic self, and you're going to have true connections with people.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Big thank you to Ashley Blow, the Dragon King, Bobby Friday, all the questions and comments in the comment section. Thank you so much for being so engaged in our conversation today. I know we covered a lot of bases. We started out talking about our childhoods. We talked about gender, we talked about drag, and we talked about spirituality. I think we really covered a lot of ground today. And I really thank you all for being so willing to share a part of yourself with us here today, because, it's not something that you have to do. And I think I feel very honored that you're willing to say yes. You're willing to show up today, and you're willing to share yourself with me and with our audience and those who will come across this interview at a later date. I did want to take a moment just to invite folks, if they did enjoy this conversation today on Dragon Spirituality, wherever you're coming across this, if you're watching us live, put it in the comments. If you're watching us on YouTube or Twitch or Facebook, or listening to us on a podcast, please do leave us a message in the comments or in the description. Reach out to us. Our contact information will live there for forever. I'll do my best to keep it up to date, so you can try to reach out to us and get connected with us. Please share this video or audio with a friend or another person in your life who you think may benefit from this conversation. I wanted to also send a great thank you to Glide and the Glide Pride team. I'd like to thank Mark and LB, who were our camera and our production team today. Thank you so much. We couldn't have done it as smoothly and as well without you. So thank you so much for showing up for us here today. And as always, if you want to, we did mention some other folks: Peaches Christ, Lotus Boy, who is a sibling to the Dragon King, as well as many other 30 other artists have also had these conversations. So if you want to get more, I guess you want to hear more about drag and spirituality, check out the podcast or YouTube at A Queer Chaplain. And I think that's all we need to say. Maybe we can bring all four of us up on the stage equally, and we can wave hello and goodbye. I love you, and happy Pride to everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Inside all that greatness and all of your adventures, you're all alone. Hold up, baby, I can't sit beside you. Just gonna be